Comrade Kamala refuses to debate Trump on any other network, including CNN. They are too fair for her, I guess. You know, ABC, the network that George Stephanopoulos works at, the network that Donna Brazile works at. Donna Brazile, you may remember, is the individual who gave Clinton the questions that she was going to be asked during her debate against Trump. Donna Brazile fed the questions to Hillary Clinton before the debate. And now this is the only network that Kamala Harris will go on. Not CBS, not NBC, not CNN, not Fox, exclusively on ABC. And now she wants to change the rules. In Georgia, Brian Kemp is trying to play nice with Donald Trump. Former President Trump went to Atlanta 3 weeks ago and had a rally at Georgia State University where they excluded a large number of people from being able to come into the venue. They said, oh, the fire marshal won't permit it. Well, what does the fire marshal say during a Georgia State basketball game when every seat is filled? It was shenanigans. You know it, and I know it. But when President Trump went there, he was very critical of Brian Kemp. As you know, they have not been friends, and they've had a little battle going back to 2020 and even before, when Brian Kemp refused to appoint Trump's preference for the United States Senate. So Trump wanted Kemp, who had the power of appointment, by the way, to appoint Doug Collins, who was a Trump ally and who had served in the United States House of Representatives with distinction. He was the ranking minority member on the Judiciary Committee. He stood up to the Dems, and he was a force to be reckoned with. Instead, Kemp appointed his own individual, namely Kelly Loeffler. Kelly's a very nice person. I happen to know her. I happen to have served on a board with her in Atlanta. I have the utmost respect for her. She was not a good candidate for the United States Senate. She had no prior experience in politics, to my knowledge, and she appeared very programmed and robotic during the debates. My wife, who is non-political, said, my gosh, how many times is she going to say that she's a poor farm girl from Iowa? But they dressed her up in pigtails and polka-dotted shirts. To me, and I like Kelly. She's probably not going to like me after this, but I'm just going to tell you the way it is. She's a public figure. I have a radio program where I speak the truth and talk about political current events and try and give you the backstory. But Kelly Loeffler, of all the people that had filled out an application for consideration, was one of the weaker people. And we lost a United States Senate seat. Now, after that experience, Kelly's gotten much better. But I saw her in her office a month after she lost the Senate race, and she came into the conference room, and she was in a beautiful blue suit with a single strand of pearls and a very expensive ink pen, and she looked like a United States senator. I thought to myself, where'd the pigtails and the polka dot shirt go? You know, when President Trump goes to the factory, he does not put on a pair of coveralls. He wears his suit and his tie. And what does that convey? It conveys to me that he is genuine. He is being who he is. And I know for a fact that his handlers are not able to influence Donald Trump if he doesn't intuitively agree. He is going to be his own person. And I have great admiration for that. And when I ran for Attorney General, I had one or two people come up to me and say, oh, John, you got to get your blue jeans, your cowboy boots, and your flannel shirts on, like David Perdue did. Well, I looked at David Perdue. You know, he was the CEO of 3 large companies, I think publicly traded, perhaps at least one of them. And he was a corporate executive, well-educated at Georgia Tech, very polished. And he comes out in a cowboy jacket, denim jacket, and cowboy boots. And it looked as phony as it was. So back to the point. Kemp was mad at Trump because Trump was mad at Kemp over the U.S. Senate appointment of Kelly Loeffler over Doug Collins. Now, I shared President Trump's view that Collins would be a much better appointee. I happen to know Doug, and I'm crazy about Doug. As I said, I know Kelly. I know David Perdue. I like all three of them. But Doug Collins would have won that Senate seat, in my opinion. So that started the feud, and then 2020 came along. There was election fraud in Georgia of epic and mammoth proportion, and Donald Trump asked Brian Kemp to do his job and not certify the election, not steal an election, not interfere with an election, but to call a timeout and reconcile the discrepancies, determine with certainty whether there had been material fraud. Then Raffensperger goes on 60 Minutes and says, most secure election in history. What a bunch of baloney. You know, and I know, and Fonnie Willis knows that that election was rigged and stolen. And so Donald Trump was rightfully really mad at Brian Kemp for not stepping up and doing his job. Now, people tell me all the time, don't you like Brian Kemp? You're not nice about Brian Kemp. I will tell you, I think he has been a wonderful governor and maybe the smartest politician I have ever witnessed. He may come off as a country bumpkin, but let me tell you, he is smart and he is shrewd and he really knows how to work it. Now, that's my paradigm, and I think he has been a good governor. But, and here is the windshield wiper. Billy Bob was a good husband and a good father, but he beats his wife. Well, I'm sorry, I think that disqualifies Billy Bob of being a good husband and father. What do you think? Similarly, I think Brian Kemp has been a great governor, but he failed us when we needed him most. And I have a difficult time forgiving him. Now, Trump went to Georgia, went to Atlanta, virtually across the street from the state capitol where Brian Kemp's office is, and he was very uncharitable towards Brian Kemp, and he caught a lot of flack for it. He caught a lot of flack for it because people considered it to be non-gentlemanly and an affront to the Georgia governor. And people say, oh, you need to look forward, not backward. Don't create a split in our party and run the risk of you losing Georgia. Now, here's where it gets really good and where I give Kemp a lot of credit. I think. Maybe yes, maybe no. But stick with me here. So Kemp comes out and says, I'm not going to resort to name calling. The president can say whatever he wants to about me, but I am going to work as hard as I can work to help get Donald Trump elected because the alternative is Kamala Harris. Huge kudos for turning the other cheek and being the bigger man. That's what I want to believe, and I am giving Governor Kemp the benefit of the doubt. But I told you, he's the smartest hen in the house. He is a brilliant politician and a shrewd politician. There could be another explanation. There could be another explanation for Trump's or for Kemp's benevolence towards the former president. Every poll I've looked at for the last 6 months showed Trump leading Biden by 10 and now Kamala by 6. Maybe, just maybe, Kemp knows that the die is cast. There ain't no drop boxes. There's a lot of eyes on the election. Georgia is under a microscope. You may have gotten away with it in 2020 or have chosen to look the other way in 2020. But it's going to be a lot harder to do that in 2024. And I predict that if Trump wins, that anybody who engages in election fraud in 2024, at a minimum 2024, are going to be called on the carpet and may end up going to jail. Now, that's strong deterrent. So maybe our governor has read the tea leaves, realizes that Trump is going to probably win Georgia, and he wants to be on the right side of it. Now, why would he be so honorable? Because you heard it here first, folks. Brian Kemp is running for the United States Senate in 2026. Mark my word. So that means that if Trump wins by the landslide that some people predict, and we won't really know that until after September the 10th. I'll talk about that in just a second. But if he wins by the landslide that people predict, he needs Trump to back him in his Senate race in 2026. It will all but assure Kemp's waltz to victory. He will return Jon Ossoff to the life of, I'm not going to say it. To me, Jon Ossoff is an empty suit. How he ever got to be United States Senator with zero accomplishment and no CV is a miracle to me. I think he will be easy pickings in 2026, at least to the extent that George Soros doesn't come and meddle again. But that's going to be hard against Kemp. Kemp is going to be a formidable candidate for the United States Senate. And if he has President Trump's endorsement, he will win by a margin like Ron DeSantis did in Florida for DeSantis' reelection. All right, so that's my take on it. Now, why am I hedging? Why am I not just willing to go all in with this love fest, this new love fest between Trump and Kemp? Very simply, Governor Kemp appears to have two sides to his mouth. I want to make nice. I'm going to do everything I can to get Trump reelected. I'm going to turn over my entire ground game in Georgia for the president's benefit. And without Green, he can't win Georgia. That translates into money. So Kemp is saying that he is going to raise money for Trump. In fact, he's holding a fundraiser for Trump this weekend. So he is clearly wanting to get back into Trump's good graces. But once again, when Kemp has an opportunity to right the wrong of 2020, what does he do? So you may be following the Georgia Elections Board, which has by a vote of 3-2 imposed election interference rules. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say that? No. They have imposed election integrity rules. They have made it more difficult to cheat. And what has our governor done? He has asked Chris Do-Nothing Carr, my former opponent for Attorney General of Georgia, who won by a landslide. Some people don't believe that. I don't question it. I'm not a spoiled sport. He won. I didn't. I'm not still after him as a candidate. I don't have any axe to grind. I really don't. I have no regrets about my race, and I have no animosity towards Chris Carr, the person. I have a lot of problems with him as Chris Carr, the Attorney General. A lot of issues. I mean, a ton of issues. We can start with 2020. We can wrap up the fact that he has made a mockery. I mean, a mockery of Georgia's Open Records Act. And I know him to not be a truthful person. He has lied to my face, and he has lied about me. And I can tell you that I never said one thing untruthful about Chris Carr. All right? So that's the man he is. That's the man I perceive him to be. But now Kemp has gone to Carr and said, tell me, do I have the power to remove the State Board of Elections members? Now, you want to talk about election interference? That is election interference. That is why I am not willing to forgive Brian Kemp, and that is why I am not willing to believe in his newfound love for Donald Trump. Because if he was really true to who he says he is, you know, this is a governor who wrote a letter to Brad Raffensperger that said that he had become aware of significant election improprieties, or I guess really he said, I can't remember the exact words that he wrote. I read the letter. It's been about 2 years ago. But election concerns, election anomalies that need to be investigated. He wrote that letter to Ravensburger. Now, when he wrote that letter, I considered it window dressing. I considered it to be nothing more than a false flag, because he's saying, on the one hand, here I got this information that maybe there were some serious things to look into in 2020. I think you should. I'd like a report back to my office. Do you think he ever got a report back to his office? Do you think that you asked the perpetrator of the crime to investigate himself and to give you a report back? Why did Kemp not send that letter to the head of the GBI if he really wanted answers? If it was really a genuine letter, if it was really a inquiry made in good faith, why not send it to the GBI and ask them to investigate? Or why not send it to the Attorney General and ask him to open an investigation, just as I promised that I would do if I were elected Attorney General? None of that happened. None of that happened.